The stars stretched out across the cold expanse of space, like scattered diamonds in the velvet blackness. But beneath that infinite sky, something was stirring. A new power was rising, a force that had watched humanity for centuries, biding its time. They had seen us grow from nothing, from the ashes of war and chaos, into something dangerous. Now they had decided it was time to act. They were the Xantar, a race known for their advanced technology and their unshakable pride. Across the galaxy, they had conquered and controlled countless worlds, enslaving species far older and more powerful than us. They believed that no race could stand against them, that no species could challenge the might of the Xantar Empire. But there was one, just one, that they had underestimated: the humans. It all began when the Xantar fleet entered our solar system, cloaked in the darkness of deep space. They moved with the precision of a predator, confident in their superiority, certain that no human force could stand against them. They didn't know that we had been preparing for this day for years. From the moment we first saw their ships on the edge of our solar system, we knew this day would come, and when it did, we weren't going to be the helpless prey they expected. On Earth, there was no panic, no chaos, just a quiet, unwavering resolve. Military leaders, scientists, and civilians alike were ready. Hidden beneath the oceans, deep underground, in the quiet corners of our cities, humans had been secretly constructing a fleet of our own. We had taken every advantage of our adaptability, our resourcefulness, and when the Xantar arrived, they found not a species scrambling to react, but a people who were ready. For the first time in history, the greatest military power in the galaxy was about to meet the most dangerous force in the universe: humanity's will to survive. But the Xantar were not fools. They had their own spies, their own agents infiltrating human society. They knew what we were capable of, and they believed that it wouldn't be enough. They were wrong. The first battle was fought on Earth, above the quiet cities, above the fields of green, and beneath the wide skies. The Xantar came with overwhelming force, thousands of ships capable of wiping out entire armies in seconds. But we had something they didn't expect. We fought with everything we had. The first shots were fired on a cool, clear night. A human pilot, in an experimental fighter craft, broke the silence with a burst of speed and an explosion that lit up the night sky. It was a warning. The Xantar weren't just facing a planet of survivors. They were facing a species that would never back down. Every human around the world took up arms, not just as soldiers, but as defenders of everything they held dear. The Xantar retaliated, launching a full-scale invasion, raining down destruction from their warships. Cities burned. The world seemed to tizzle on the edge of extinction. But humanity wasn't broken. They couldn't break us. We fought back with everything we had, and slowly, piece by piece, the tide of battle began to shift. The Xantar thought their superior technology would crush us, but they couldn't account for the one thing that made us different: our resolve, our adaptability, and the way we fought not just for victory, but for the very soul of humanity. It wasn't just the soldiers on the front lines who fought. It was the engineers who worked tirelessly to modify our technology, the civilians who built barricades and shelters, and the people who refused to give up even in the face of certain death. There was no surrender in the hearts of humankind. It was this unity, this unbreakable spirit, that began to turn the tide. As the days stretched into weeks and then months, the Xantar realized that this was not going to be the easy conquest they had anticipated. In fact, their empire had never faced anything like humanity's resistance. They launched a second wave of attacks, more brutal and more desperate than the first. But with every assault we adapted. With every strike, we learned and grew stronger. And yet, the Xantar were relentless. They brought out weapons the likes of which the universe had never seen, weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single blast. They began targeting human colonies on distant worlds, hoping to force us into submission. It was a brutal war, a war fought not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of every human who refused to back down. The Xantar thought they could break us, but they didn't realize that the more they pushed, the harder we fought back. It wasn't until the Xantar launched their final assault that the true price of their challenge became clear. They had underestimated us. They had underestimated our potential, our ability to survive against all odds. They believed that humanity was just a small, insignificant species, too young to be a threat. But they were wrong. The Xantar learned, too late, that when you challenge humanity, you don't just face an enemy, you face the very force of survival itself. But even as the last great battle raged on, as humanity pushed back with everything we had, the Xantar had a final ace up their sleeve. A weapon so powerful, so devastating that even we weren't sure we could stop it. In the distance, the stars themselves began to flicker and dim as the Xantar prepared their last strike. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a weapon that could erase entire worlds from existence. And that's where we leave you. The fate of humanity hangs in the balance. The Xantar may have made the mistake of underestimating us, but now, as they unleash their final weapon, will we be able to stop them in time? Or will the Xantar succeed in their final bid to bring us to our knees? Stay tuned. The next part of this story promises to reveal whether humanity's fight for survival can end in victory, or if this is the end of our species. The Xantar fleet loomed like a shadow over the earth, its vast armada spreading across the heavens, eclipsing the stars themselves. There was no turning back. Humanity had made its stand, but the price of survival had never been so high. For every victory, there were hundreds of casualties. For every push forward, there were still countless innocent lives lost, cities reduced to rubble, and the landscape scarred by the relentless assault of the Xantar's overwhelming firepower. It had been a long journey to this point, one shaped by years of struggle, innovation, and sacrifice. But the first shot fired against the Xantar had been a declaration. Humanity would not surrender. When their fleet first appeared in the orbit of Mars, many were skeptical, believing it to be another one of those quiet signals from distant space, a minor anomaly. But then came the rumble of the first explosion, the light in the sky brighter than any star, as the Xantar made their presence known. And that was when the countdown began, not just for the invasion, but for the future of humanity itself. No one could have predicted the rapid escalation that followed. Just days after the initial attack, humanity united in a way that had never been seen before. There was no room for petty differences, no time for the divisions that had once fractured the world. Politicians set aside their power struggles, religious leaders put aside their doctrines, and nations forgot their borders. The war was no longer one of individual countries. It was a war for all of humanity, for the survival of every person on Earth. The planet's entire infrastructure, everything from space programs to underground bunkers, was repurposed for one singular goal: to push back the invaders. But the Xantar were not an enemy easily beaten. Their warships were technological marvels, massive structures capable of launching beams that could cut through mountains with ease. Their weapons were precise, calculated, and destructive in ways humanity had never imagined. Even their soldiers, when they deployed them to Earth, were an imposing sight. Taller than humans, with skeletal exoskeletons that made them look like walking towers, their alien nature was far removed from anything humanity had ever faced. These were creatures that had conquered entire galaxies, and they brought that weight of experience with them as they unleashed wave after wave of destruction. At first, humanity's responses were scattered and disorganized. Cities were torn apart by the Xantar's first volley of strikes. Military forces struggled to mount a defense, and for a time, it seemed as if the Earth might fall before the might of the alien onslaught. But the humans refused to give up. There was something primal about the way they fought back, an unrelenting spirit that could not be extinguished, no matter the odds. Humanity's ability to adapt, to find new ways to survive, had always been their greatest strength, and it was in the darkest days that this characteristic began to shine. In hidden labs beneath the surface, scientists worked day and night, repurposing the technology humanity had long been developing for space exploration and weaponry. The first response came in the form of small-scale counterattacks, experimental fighter jets, and homemade laser cannons that could only barely dent the Xantar's armor. But it was enough to show that humanity was far from helpless. Then came the turning point, the construction of the first true human warships, designed not for exploration, but for conflict. The engineers and builders of these ships were the unsung heroes of this war. Every inch of these crafts was meticulously planned, each system designed not just to fight the Xantar, but to survive against overwhelming odds. These ships were built in secret, hidden in military bunkers around the world. At first, no one knew if they would even work, but when the first of them broke through Earth's atmosphere, it sent a shockwave through the ranks of humanity's forces. Finally, humanity had a weapon of its own to fight back. But even as these new warships began to turn the tide of the battle, there were still countless unknowns. The Xantar, having underestimated humanity, had made a critical miscalculation. They assumed that the war would be over in a matter of weeks, that they could crush the human spirit with their superior technology. But what they didn't understand was the unpredictability of humanity's will to survive. Each victory, no matter how small, served to ignite something inside the human race, a fire that would not die out easily. One of the most striking examples of this resistance came in the form of a small, isolated group of civilians who had survived the initial onslaught. They had taken refuge in the mountains, where the Xantar's overwhelming firepower couldn't reach. These survivors became a symbol of the human spirit, people who had lost everything but refused to give in. They started small, building weapons from scrap metal, rigging traps, and creating guerrilla forces that harassed the Xantar supply lines. They were led by a former military strategist who had been caught in the first wave of attacks. His knowledge of the Xantar's tactics became invaluable to humanity's growing resistance. Through his leadership, the group grew from a handful of survivors to a small army that posed a serious threat to the invaders. But as humanity adapted and began to push back, the Xantar began to realize that their initial victory was slipping through their fingers. The more they attacked, the more humanity fought back, learning from each encounter and growing stronger with each battle. The Xantar's arrogance began to show cracks. They thought they could crush us with technology, but they hadn't accounted for the human spirit, the resilience, the innovation, the determination. Then came the moment when the Xantar launched their final assault. Their fleet, massive and seemingly invincible, closed in on Earth's atmosphere. But this time, the humans were ready. The newly constructed warships, armed with experimental weapons and shielded by layers of protective alloys, took to the skies. The battle above the Earth's surface was unlike anything the planet had ever seen. For hours, the two forces clashed in a deadly dance, with explosions lighting up the night sky and tearing through the atmosphere. The Xantar, unable to break humanity's newfound resolve, began to deploy their final weapon, a massive planet-destroying bomb that could wipe out all life on Earth in one fell swoop. This weapon, rumored to have been designed for the sole purpose of eradicating entire civilizations, was humanity's greatest threat. If it detonated, nothing would remain, no survivors, no hope, nothing. As the countdown to the weapon's activation began, the pressure mounted. Humanity's last hope rested on a small group of brave souls who had infiltrated the Xantar flagship. They had one mission: to deactivate the weapon before it was too late. But as they worked their way through the ship, they discovered something even more horrifying. The Xantar had not just planned to destroy Earth. They had engineered a way to make sure that nothing could rise from the ashes. Their weapon would poison the planet's atmosphere, ensuring that no life would be able to survive for centuries. The stakes were higher than ever before. Humanity's survival was now tied to the success of this desperate mission. The clock was ticking, and with every passing second, the Xantar's weapon grew closer to activation. Tensions ran high among the team as they navigated the treacherous corridors of the Xantar ship, fighting their way past alien soldiers and deadly traps. Every moment was a gamble, every decision a risk. The slightest mistake could mean the end of everything. The leader of the mission, a former soldier with a past filled with regret and pain, was haunted by the weight of the task before them. His heart pounded in his chest as he thought of the families back home, of the people who had trusted him to keep them safe. He couldn't fail. Not now. Not when humanity was so close to the brink of destruction. But even as the team neared the weapon's core, they discovered that there was more at play than they had ever imagined. The Xantar had been manipulating the human resistance from the shadows, feeding false intelligence, and creating divisions within the ranks. The true leader of the Xantar invasion was not the warlord they had fought in battle. It was someone far more insidious. someone who had infiltrated human society long before the first shot was fired. The revelation hit like a hammer to the chest. It was a twist no one could have foreseen, and as the team prepared to make their final assault on the weapon, the true nature of their enemies began to reveal itself. Humanity had no idea just how far the Xantar had gone in their attempts to destroy them. The final battle was no longer just about stopping a weapon. It was about exposing the dark conspiracy that had been woven into every corner of human civilization. The final moments of the mission were nothing short of chaotic. Time was running out, and the weapon's countdown was nearing its end. Would humanity be able to stop it in time, or would the Xantar's final gambit bring about the end of Earth itself? The fate of the planet hung in the balance, and the answer would come in the most unexpected of ways. The story was far from over. The atmosphere inside the Xantar flagship was a cold, oppressive silence, broken only by the soft hum of the alien machinery. The team moved quickly through the narrow, metallic corridors, their footsteps echoing against the walls. Their weapons were drawn, their bodies tense with anticipation. Every corner could hide a threat, every doorway a trap. Time was not on their side. They had less than an hour before the Xantar weapon activated, and if they failed, it would be the end of everything. The leader of the team, the soldier who had once fought in wars he could no longer remember, felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him. He tried not to think about the consequences, tried to push aside the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. His thoughts kept returning to the families, the children, the future of humanity. They had already given so much. Now it was up to him, and the team, to see this through. Failure was not an option. But with every step, the pressure mounted. The Xantar's final weapon was at the heart of the ship, deep within its fortress-like core. They had been warned that it was heavily guarded, but no amount of intel could truly prepare them for the alien defenses they would face. The walls were lined with energy barriers, and automated drones patrolled every hall. Yet through sheer determination, the team pressed on, using their wits and military training to navigate the labyrinth of high-tech security. With every level they descended, the air seemed to grow thicker, the hum of the ship louder. It was as if the entire Xantar fleet was alive, breathing down their necks. The deeper they went, the closer they came to the center of the storm. The stakes were growing higher, and the tension was palpable. There was no turning back now. The countdown to the weapon's detonation was already ticking away. As they neared the core of the ship, the team encountered more resistance. The Xantar soldiers were everywhere. Towering over the humans, their exoskeletons gleamed under the harsh artificial lights. The creatures moved with purpose, as if they had been waiting for this moment. The team fought back with everything they had, but the Xantar were relentless. Each battle was a struggle for survival, a fight for every inch of ground. The soldier at the front of the team, whose name had long been forgotten in the chaos of war, took the lead. He was the one who had faced death before and kept going, the one who had watched comrades fall and still fought for the future. His every movement was calculated, his mind sharp, but there was a part of him, something deep within, that began to crack under the weight of what was at stake. The Xantar weren't just invaders. They were a symbol of everything humanity had struggled against, everything that had sought to extinguish their light. The thought of failure gnawed at him, threatening to unravel his resolve. As they moved through the corridors, the team encountered a large chamber. It was unlike any space they had seen before, massive, with high ceilings and an overwhelming sense of cold. In the center of the room, suspended in a large containment field, was the Xantar weapon. It shimmered with an eerie glow, a device of unimaginable power. The weapon was surrounded by an intricate network of alien technology, blinking lights and strange symbols pulsing around it like a deadly halo. It was only then that the full scale of the weapon's destruction became clear. The Xantar had not just built a bomb. They had crafted an engine of extinction. The weapon's core was designed to manipulate the very atmosphere of a planet, altering its composition to ensure that no life could survive. It was a doomsday device that could turn Earth into a barren, lifeless rock, its air unbreathable, its surface scorched. It was the final insult to humanity, the last proof of the Xantar's arrogance. The team had reached the heart of the Xantar invasion, and now the final battle awaited. The leader's mind raced. They had to disable the weapon before it was too late. But how? The device was surrounded by a force field, a barrier of energy that no human technology could penetrate. The only way to deactivate it was to enter the core, where a single mistake could set off the countdown. But the Xantar had anticipated this. They had set up multiple layers of defense, both mechanical and biological, to ensure no one would reach the heart of their weapon. The team spread out, taking cover behind pillars and broken machinery. The leader exchanged glances with the others. It was time. They knew the risks. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. They had to trust each other, trust their training, and hope they could overcome the odds. They weren't just fighting for themselves now. They were fighting for all of humanity. The leader moved first, taking a deep breath and stepping into the open. A blast of energy ripped through the air as a Xantar soldier emerged from the shadows, a hulking figure of armor and lethal intent. The human soldier fired, his aim true, and the alien staggered back, but more were coming. The rest of the team followed, guns blazing as they cut through the alien ranks. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of gunfire, every shot echoing like a death knell. But in the chaos, something unexpected happened. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the lights flickered. The team looked up, alarmed. Something was happening. The Xantar weapon, which had once been dormant and lifeless, now hummed with energy, its core coming to life in a terrifying display of power. The countdown was accelerating, moving faster than anyone could have predicted. A voice crackled over the comms. "It's too late. They've activated it. We can't stop it." The leader's heart sank. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The world, it seemed, was slipping through his fingers. The Xantar were on the verge of winning, and humanity's last hope was fading. But then, the leader's mind snapped back into focus. He couldn't give up, not now, not when everything was on the line. "Keep moving," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "We still have a chance." They were close, so close. The energy field around the weapon flickered, the technology faltering for just a moment. It was their opening. They had to reach the core, had to disable it before it was too late. With a fierce determination, they pushed forward, cutting down Xantar soldiers as they went. The closer they got, the more the tension mounted. The countdown was nearly at 0. Every step felt like it could be their last. But there was a catch. As they neared the heart of the weapon, the team was forced to confront something far worse than they had imagined. The Xantar had anticipated humanity's every move, and the final line of defense was not just a wall of soldiers. It was a trap. A trap designed not to stop them, but to lead them into a final, unavoidable confrontation. The leader felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as he realized the true nature of what they were facing. The enemy wasn't just a race of conquerors. They were a force of nature, willing to sacrifice everything to ensure their victory. And in their final act of defiance, they had set a trap that would cost the humans everything. The countdown was down to the last few seconds, and as the team prepared for the ultimate confrontation, the leader realized there was only one question left to answer. Would humanity survive this final test? Or would the Xantar's arrogance be the end of them all? The countdown continued its relentless march toward 0, its ticking now a deafening sound in the ears of the team. Every second felt like a hammer strike to the chest, and the closer they got to the core of the Xantar weapon, the more the air seemed to hum with energy, thick with the power that surged through the alien ship. But just as the team neared the final stretch, something unexpected occurred. A shift in the atmosphere, something that made their blood run cold. The leader, his pulse racing, suddenly stopped in his tracks. A low rumble echoed throughout the chamber, reverberating through the walls of the ship. It wasn't just the vibrations of the countdown. It was something else entirely. His instincts flared, a cold sense of dread seizing him as he turned toward the others. "Move," he barked, his voice raw with urgency. They had to get to the weapon, had to stop it. But something was wrong. The lights overhead flickered wildly, and the walls groaned as if the ship itself was alive and resisting them. The energy field around the weapon grew more intense, an oppressive wave of force pushing back against them. For a brief moment, the team's weapons failed. An unnatural silence fell over them, like a heavy hand pressing against their chests. The air seemed to thin, and the darkness of the room deepened, swallowing the light of their torches. Then came the voice, an unnervingly calm voice, one that resonated directly in their minds, bypassing the traditional communication channels entirely. "Did you think we would let you destroy everything we have worked for?" The voice was neither mechanical nor human, but something far more sinister, an echo, a presence that seemed to fill the entire room. It wasn't just one Xantar soldier or leader speaking. No, it was something far more terrifying. The voice emanated from the depths of the Xantar flagship itself, a chilling reminder that they weren't just facing invaders. They were facing an entire consciousness, a collective intelligence that saw the humans as little more than ants beneath its feet. The leader's breath caught in his throat. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a trap. And they weren't the first to fall into it. "We have watched you, humans," the voice continued, its tone colder than space itself. "From the moment you fired your first shot at us, we knew you were special. You see, your kind, your flawed, magnificent species, has always fascinated us. We studied your battles, your resilience, your drive to survive. But we didn't come here to destroy. We came here to test you, to see if you could evolve. And now we have decided your fate." The team froze. Their minds raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. The weapon before them, the one they had been so desperate to deactivate, was not the only danger in this place. The Xantar had known they would come. They had anticipated every move, every tactic. The invasion was not just about defeating humanity. It was about something far more insidious. The Xantar had been manipulating them from the start, orchestrating this entire war as an experiment, a test to push humanity to the brink of extinction. A new wave of dread washed over the soldiers. They weren't here simply to stop a weapon. They were the subjects of an experiment, the pawns in a cruel game played by beings who saw them as little more than lab rats. The weapon wasn't just a weapon. It was the culmination of the Xantar's twisted plan, designed not to destroy, but to change humanity itself. And then came the second twist, the trap that the leader could never have anticipated. As the team prepared to make their final move, the Xantar flagship's walls seemed to dissolve before them. It was as if the very fabric of reality around them was being torn apart. The ship began to collapse in on itself, but not in the way they expected. It was no longer just a physical structure. It had become something else. The ship was now a part of the Xantar's consciousness, and they were no longer simply fighting a fleet. They were fighting an entity that lived, breathed, and thought across the entirety of the ship. "Welcome to the final phase of your evolution," the voice said, its tone filled with a sickening satisfaction. "You will face the truth about your species. The weapon will activate, yes, but only you can choose how it ends." The energy field around the weapon intensified, its light blinding. The countdown reached its final seconds, and in that instant, the team realized that their mission had been doomed from the start. It wasn't just about deactivating a bomb. It was about understanding the nature of the Xantar themselves. This entire war, this entire invasion, had been orchestrated to test humanity's ability to survive on a level they never could have imagined. And now, the final test was about to begin. The leader looked around at his team. Their faces were grim, set in determination, but there was no escaping the reality of their situation. They were fighting for something more than survival now. They were fighting for their very identity. The Xantar were testing humanity's spirit, their resilience, their ability to adapt. They weren't just invaders. They were manipulative gods, playing with humanity like pieces on a chessboard. And in the next moment, as the countdown ticked to its final second, everything went dark. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a sudden shockwave. It was the complete and utter silence of space itself. The ship seemed to vanish, the world around them collapsing, and for a moment, the soldiers were weightless, floating in nothingness. The very ground beneath their feet had ceased to exist. Then, as quickly as it had vanished, the world reappeared, but it wasn't the world they had known. The team found themselves in an entirely new landscape, an alien terrain that stretched out before them in impossible shapes and colors. The sky above was a strange shade of red, and the air was thick with an unfamiliar substance. They had crossed into another dimension, another plane of existence entirely. The Xanter's voice echoed around them, as if coming from every direction at once. You have passed through the first trial, but the real test begins now. Will you bend or will you break? It was clear now. This was no longer just about stopping a weapon. This was about proving humanity's worth to the Xanter, proving that they were more than the sum of their parts. Humanity was not just fighting for their survival, they were fighting for their place in the universe, for the right to exist in a cosmos that had long since forgotten what it meant to be human. The team was stranded, their options narrowing with each passing second. The clock was ticking, and as they stood on this alien world, the weight of their mission and the looming terror of the unknown pressed in around them. What had they truly walked into? And, more importantly, could they survive the next stage of the Xantar's cruel, unforgiving trial? The team stood in the alien landscape, disoriented but driven by the singular purpose that had brought them here. The Xantar's voice rang in their ears, a constant reminder that they were being watched, that they were still part of some twisted experiment. The sky above them, a deep shade of crimson, cast a haunting glow over the unfamiliar terrain. The ground beneath their feet pulsed with an energy that felt wrong, as though the world itself was alive in ways they couldn't begin to understand. They had entered a dimension that was not their own, a place where time and space seemed to bend and warp, and the Xanter had ensured that there was no escape. The leader glanced at his team. They were battered, exhausted, and their weapons were nearly depleted, but there was no choice now. They had come this far. They had to see this through. He could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on him more than ever, and despite the fear clawing at the edges of his mind, there was something else, a fire, a stubborn defiance that had driven humanity from the very beginning. They wouldn't bend. They wouldn't break. In the distance, a massive structure loomed, its jagged edges rising from the alien landscape like the teeth of some monstrous beast. It was the source of the Xantar's voice, the epicenter of their influence. If they were to survive, they had to reach that structure. But as they began to move, the ground beneath their feet quaked. The air grew heavier, and a low hum vibrated through the air, as though the very fabric of reality was coming undone. "Stay sharp," the leader ordered, though his voice was tight with apprehension. Something was wrong. The countdown was over, but the tension hadn't dissipated. If anything, it was escalating. Every step they took seemed to draw them deeper into the Xantar's web. Suddenly, the landscape around them shifted. The alien sky seemed to fold in on itself, and the structure they had been heading toward was no longer where it had been moments ago. It had transformed into something else entirely, something even more grotesque. The entire dimension seemed to change in response to their presence, as if it were alive and aware of their every move. Then the Xanter spoke again. "Do you truly believe you can win? That you can defeat us? You are nothing but ants beneath our feet. You can't even begin to comprehend the power that lies before you." The team's footsteps faltered, but the leader's resolve hardened. They had come this far, and they had learned something. The Xantar weren't invincible. They were no gods. They were manipulators, and the leader knew what they needed to do. It wasn't just about defeating the Xantar weapon anymore. It was about breaking the cycle, showing the Xantar that humanity couldn't be controlled or tested. They had to break the illusion, the Xantar's false reality. A sudden wave of realization washed over the leader. They were in a simulation, a controlled environment designed to test them, yes, but also to manipulate them, to make them feel powerless. The Xantar had never truly intended for the humans to win. It was never about the weapon, the countdown, or the alien soldiers. It was about crushing their spirit, proving once and for all that humanity was not meant to stand against the Xantar. The leader turned to the team, his voice steady. "This isn't real. We've been tricked. This whole dimension, it's an illusion." One of the soldiers blinked, clearly not understanding, but the leader's eyes were wide with recognition. He had seen it now, the pattern in the chaos, the inconsistencies in the world around them. The Xantar were trying to make them give up, to make them lose hope. But the leader refused to fall into their trap. "Everything we've seen, this weapon, this world, it's all a lie. The Xantar want us to break, but we're not going to let them. We're going to show them that we can fight not just their weapons, but their illusions." The ground trembled again, and this time the sky above cracked open, revealing a glimpse of the true world beyond. For a split second, the team saw the Xantar flagship, vast and towering against the backdrop of space. But the vision was fleeting, fading as quickly as it appeared. The illusion was breaking, and with it, the Xantar's control over them. "Now," the leader shouted, pushing the team forward. They charged toward the now shifting structure, running against the oppressive force that sought to slow them down. The Xantar's voice screamed at them to stop, to surrender, but their resolve was stronger now. Each step they took felt like a victory, a defiance of everything the Xantar had tried to impose upon them. The leader reached the center of the structure first, his hand slamming against a large console that seemed to pulse with dark energy. The others followed, and together, they focused on the device, their combined will pushing against the force that tried to keep them from breaking free. The console flickered, then sparked, and in that instant, the entire illusion shattered. The team found themselves back on the Xantar flagship, standing before the weapon. But now they had control. The countdown had stopped. The weapon was deactivated. A voice, real this time, echoed through their comms. It was the voice of their commander back on Earth. "You did it. You stopped the weapon." But just as the team began to breathe a sigh of relief, the leader felt something cold wash over him. The victory was not as simple as they had imagined. "Congratulations, humans," the Xantar voice said, this time much closer, much darker. "You think you've won? You think you've outsmarted us? You have only proven one thing, that you are a worthy opponent. But this was never the end. This was the beginning." The team looked around, their faces pale. The Xantar flagship, though seemingly deactivated, began to hum again, its system slowly rebooting. The ground shook beneath them, and a new horrifying realization dawned on them. The Xantar weren't just a race of invaders. They were a species that could adapt, evolve, and conquer in ways humanity couldn't yet understand. And their defeat had only made them more dangerous, more determined to ensure that humanity would never threaten their control again. As the team braced for what was to come, the leader knew one thing for certain: the battle for humanity's survival was far from over. What they had thought was the final test was only the beginning of something far worse. The Xantar had underestimated humanity's will to survive, but in doing so, they had unleashed a fight that would span far beyond the reaches of space and into the very heart of humanity itself. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The tension in the air was palpable. The team stood in the shadow of the Xantar flagship, the hum of its systems growing louder by the second. The words of the Xantar still echoed in their minds. This was the beginning. The leader could feel the weight of that statement pressing down on him. Had they really won, or had they simply triggered something far worse than they could ever have imagined? The ship's interior flickered and groaned as if it were coming back to life, a beast stirring from a deep slumber. But this time, there was no fear in the leader's heart, only determination. The Xantar had underestimated humanity once, and they wouldn't make that mistake again. The team had faced the worst the aliens could throw at them and emerged stronger for it. Now, they would prove it once more. "Get ready," the leader said, his voice steady as he glanced at the others. "We have one chance to end this once and for all." There was no need for further words. The soldiers knew what had to be done. The Xantar might have thought they were in control, but the humans had something the aliens could never understand: an unwavering resolve. They didn't fight for power, for control, or for conquest. They fought for their families, their future, and their very right to exist. The leader motioned to the rest of the team. They moved quickly, coordinating their every step as they approached the central core of the ship once again. It was no longer just about deactivating a weapon. It was about ensuring humanity's survival in a galaxy full of species that saw them as weak, expendable. The Xantar had come to Earth thinking they could crush humanity in one swift strike. But humanity had proven them wrong, and would continue to do so. As they reached the core, the leader once again placed his hand on the console. This time, however, there was no hesitation. The power flowing through the ship seemed to respond to their presence. But the humans didn't falter. They were in control now. Together, They tapped into every ounce of strength they had, every lesson learned from their struggle, every sacrifice made along the way. The console sparked to life, but this time it wasn't a weapon. It was a lifeline. The core began to tremble, its systems flickering erratically as if it were fighting against them. But the humans were relentless. The leader's eyes locked onto the screen before him, watching as the countdown that had once seemed like humanity's doom began to reverse. The Xantar voice crackled, now frantic, but still confident. "You can't win. You can't stop us. We are everywhere." The leader didn't respond. He didn't need to. In that moment, it was clear. The Xantar weren't everywhere. They were just one race among many in a vast, untamed universe. And humanity was ready to show that they weren't just a species that could survive. They were a species that could adapt, evolve, and conquer. The countdown reached 0 once again, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was the final seal of their victory. The lights in the flagship flickered one last time before going completely dark. The Xantar were silenced. The weapon, once a looming threat, now lay dormant, powerless. The humans had done it. They had not only deactivated the weapon, they had disrupted the Xantar's hold over the galaxy. The leader took a deep breath and turned toward his team. They stood there, exhausted but victorious. Their mission was complete. They had saved Earth, and perhaps they had saved countless other worlds from falling to the Xantar. "We did it," one of the soldiers muttered, disbelief in their voice. The leader smiled, though it was a tired, bittersweet smile. "We didn't just survive. We showed them who we are." As they made their way back to the ship's docking bay, the leader couldn't help but think of the Xantar's words. This was the beginning. They were right in one regard. The war wasn't truly over. The Xantar had learned humanity's strength, and there would be more challenges ahead. But the humans had proven something far more important. They weren't easily defeated. They would keep fighting, keep pushing forward, and no matter the odds, they would never stop protecting their world, their future. The leader's thoughts were interrupted by the soft hum of their ship's engines as they began to lift off, breaking free of the alien flagship. Their mission was a success, but they knew it was only one chapter in a long and uncertain journey. The Xantar would regroup. They would plan again. But this time, they would know that humanity wasn't just a fleeting threat. It was a force to be reckoned with, a force that wouldn't be broken by alien invaders or their deadly weapons. As the ship soared toward the stars, the leader's mind turned toward Earth. He thought of the people waiting back home, the families, the children, the lives that depended on them. Humanity had faced down extinction, had proven their worth, and now it was time to rebuild. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. And yet, for the first time since the conflict had begun, there was hope. Hope that humanity, despite its flaws, its struggles, and its mistakes, had something that no other species in the galaxy could match: the will to fight, to survive, and to protect what mattered most. As the stars stretched out before them, the leader knew one thing for certain: humanity's story was far from finished. It was only just beginning.